Gunshots cracked across the concrete like a machine stamping metal, and Maya Reed flattened herself behind a stained pillar. Fingers pressed tight to the small silver locket at her throat. Fear drove the first set of choices. Which pillar offered cover, which shadow would hide a movement, and fear kept her lungs shallow while she counted the beats between shots. The lot smelled of oil and old rain. A pair of bright headlights cut a path down an empty row, and a glossy black SUV slammed its brakes at the curb. Someone grabbed her arm, lifted her, and she felt solid hands under her knees and at the small of her back as she was carried toward the car. Maya's first thought after the shots was practical. Keep the locket safe. Her second thought was the surprising weight of the man who carried her, broad shoulders sliding a coat against her back. The soft cloth of a tailored jacket damp with the night's breath. She blinked up into a face she had never seen before and tried to read danger there. The man tightened his hold and hissed one short order. In the car, his voice was low. It left no room for argument. Maya obeyed because her hands were still shaking, and because the gunfire had pushed everything else into a single line of choices. Within those first seconds, Maya understood the central problem. She had seen something she shouldn't have. A man at the far edge of the lot lay motionless beside a pool of dark fluid. A second man staggered, clutching his side. The shooters had not yet cleared the lot. Maya had been an accidental witness when she came to the parking deck for the overnight bus, and now she had become a hazard. She did not know the names, the reasons, or the alliances. She only knew that men with guns had decided the night needed to be quieter. That concrete fact, that she had seen those men, pushed every decision she made for the rest of the chapter. The SUV's interior smelled of leather and something sharp, like cedar and tobacco. Maya kept her hand on the locket and allowed the man in front of her to draw a jacket over her shoulders. He moved with economy. His hands were precise. "Who are you?" he asked without turning. The driver answered instead, a soft name. Luca. That name landed with a clipped authority. The man carrying her glanced at Luca and at Maya in a single sweep, and then at the rearview mirror. "Tell me what you saw," he said. "Now." There was an edge in his question that made Maya's throat close. "Maya, I didn't mean to. I walked past." Her sentences broke into small, practical pieces. She described the broken taillight by the stairwell, the way a man in a dark jacket had been arguing with someone on a phone. The sudden shift of their posture when another car had pulled up. She kept to facts, locations, gestures, the sound of a name she had heard the man say once. Maya would not invent motives. She could only pass the concrete details she had noticed. Her voice was soft and urgent. Adrian Moretti, that was the name the driver used once, quietly, like an answer already known. Watched each small movement of her face and the way her fingers kept returning to the locket. Maya's fear shifted to mistrust as Adrian leaned forward and narrowed his gaze. She saw him weigh her words, muscle memory folding his jaw. "You saw a name. Adrian, say it." There was no hurry for niceties. David Lucas' hands tightened on the wheel. Maya swallowed and answered, "Marco." The name was Marco. At that, Adrian's jaw changed. He did not speak of feelings. He made decisions instead. His chin went up. He barked a single order to Luca, and the SUV peeled away from the lot. The motion of the car was a slow, urgent glide. Lights of the city streaked past in bars of amber. Maya watched Adrian's profile. A thin vertical scar caught a streetlight, the line along his cheekbone a pale seam. She noticed the leather driving gloves on the passenger's seat, and the way his fingers tapped a rhythm on the fabric. He folded his hands briefly into a steeple when thinking, an unconscious pause that made Maya think of someone putting pieces on a table to be sorted. She had time to realize she had no script for being part of any of this world. Fear remained the root of everything she did. It made her small choices matter. "Adrian, did you get a plate?" He did not accuse her. He counted options. Maya shook her head. "No, I couldn't. I left my phone in the stairwell. It fell when I ran." She felt the line of her jaw tighten. That small truth changed the calculations in the car. No witness record, only memory and a locket. Adrian's eyes flicked to the locket as she toyed with the chain. For a moment, guarded curiosity replaced the raw edge of suspicion. They reached the service road, and for a breath Maya thought the danger would lessen. Then Luca, headlights, 220, closing fast. Adrian's body moved before he spoke. He turned the wheel, not toward police lights, but toward a narrow route that would put them off the highway and deeper into private lanes. Maya's fear swung into alarm. She had never been in a car chosen by men who could reroute a city's radar. Her voice steadied with determination when she said, "Please take me somewhere safe." Adrian glanced at her. "You will answer questions first," he said. "Then we will decide where to go." The words were not gentle and not cruel. They were measures. At the faintly lit gas station edge they stopped. Maya felt the chill of the night cut into the thin coat even through the car's heat. She kept her fingers on the locket and let it fall open by accident. Inside was a tiny engraving and, in the dim light, a date she recognized from a photograph in her mother's kitchen. Adrian's hand tightened on the rim of the door. He stepped back, and his expression shifted in a way Maya could only see as personal, not purely strategic. He nothing aloud, but he reached to close the locket with a gentleness that contrasted with the way he had moved through the world moments before. Maya did not understand at first why the engraving mattered to him. He only needed her to tell him two small things: what she saw and the name she heard again. The moment she said the name, Marco the driver cursed under his breath. Luca's fingers moved to the radio and then away. For the first time since she had been lifted from behind the pillar, Maya felt an unexpected current of safety in the way Adrian's posture protected the space beside him. That safety carried a new risk. Protection could mean possession. They were not allowed to stop long. Headlights bobbed at the edge of the highway like men watching a marked animal. Luca scanned the mirrors. "They aren't police," he said. "Marco's crew." The words made the hazard concrete. A plan assembled itself in Adrian's features. He did not ask permission. He made a choice. He might only once, quietly. "Can you move fast if I carry you?" She heard the practical calculus behind the question and nodded. Her movements were small, functional, but they contained resolve. She wanted to get away from the men who fired at the lot, and to keep the locket from being pried from her fingers. Under the overpass, the world narrowed. Marco Santoro's men boxed the road in with a dozen cars. Lights flared with the first reports of gunfire. Adrian slammed the SUV into gear, threw a shoulder up to shield Maya, and scooped her into his arms. He moved with a single, decisive motion through the narrow gap between idling vehicles toward a shadowed alley. He pushed his body in front of her, feeling bullets ping against metal as he ducked and ran. Maya's breath hitched as she felt the heat of his jacket through the thin coat, and the thud of his heartbeat under her cheek as he carried her. A short, sharp exchange of gunfire forced everyone to commit. Luca slid out and returned fire with controlled bursts. Marco Santoro's voice carried from beneath the overpass, a rough bark that tried to shape the chaos into an accusation. "Adrian!" "Stop running!" he shouted. Adrian did not shout back. He ran, moving with economy, keeping Maya tucked into his chest. She noticed his signet ring as he turned to vault a drainpipe. The ring flashed gold for a single beat before the light was swallowed. The world smelled of burnt rubber and raw metal. Maya's fear moved into a new shape, survival, and she acted with it. They dived into an alley that folded between a shuttered storefront and a delivery entrance. Adrian slammed a door, slammed it again, and pressed Maya against him while he pushed a chair under the bolt. Her hands were on his jacket, fingers hooked in the fabric. She could feel the set of his shoulders, the exact way he held his head when listening for footsteps. "Stay down, Adrian." Her. His voice had a measurement now. Protective, taut, immediately ready to snap into violence. The room inside the safe house smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. A single lamp threw a pool of amber light across a simple table. Luca moved with a steady rhythm, checking locks and windows as if performing a well-practiced ritual. Marcos' men hit harder than usual. Luca, voice low. They knew you were in the lot. Someone them. Maya's heart tried to make sense of the sentence. Suspicion rose inside her on a new current. If someone had named her, she was no longer a random hazard. She had become a target. That suspicion changed her posture. She shifted from pleading to protective, deciding she would answer only what she must and withhold the rest until she could see the consequences. Adrian set her on a chair and pried the locket open again with 2 careful fingers. He did not ask about its origin. Instead, he read the tiny engraving aloud, each word a small, precise instrument. R. Santoro, June 4. His voice tightened at the name, and Maya watched a private shift cross his face. Something like memory, or a ledger being checked. She realized then that the night's violence connected to people she did not know, not merely as targets, but as family ties and debts. That realization tilted the stakes. Adrian's protection now had a reason that reached back into a shared history she could not yet see. Maya tried to explain the path she'd taken to the parking deck. Her sentences came in small, clipped pieces. I was late for a shift. I took the stairwell near the old office. I heard raised voices and then the shots. She named details. A torn shoelace on the man who fell, the way the second man's hands trembled when he reached for a satchel. Each concrete detail slid into Adrian's hands like a tool. He for clarification on the satchel. Maya described its shape and a faded logo she thought she recognized from delivery trucks. Luca, run that logo against Santoro Freight, Adrian ordered. Luca nodded and busied himself at an old laptop. He typed with short, efficient strokes and clicked through a dossier. Santoro Freight, front company for Marco. Shipments moved last month to a private dock, hit in pieces like a set of coordinates. That discovery changed the map of risk. The shooting was not a private quarrel, but part of a supply dispute that could reach farther than a single lot. Maya heard the words and felt them fold the night's randomness into a plan. Her fear shifted again, from immediate danger to the dawning understanding of what she had stumbled into. A knock at the back door yanked everyone's attention. Adrian flattened himself slightly and listened. The knock was soft, measured. Who is it? He called. A voice answered, not Marco's, not Luca's, but a neutral courier's voice that offered a single line. Drop a package. 1 minute, Adrian exchanged a quick look with Luca. He signaled for silence and motioned Maya away from the door. The knock pushed the room into a new friction. Outside forces trying to poke at the seam where they hid. That external event forced a decision. Adrian moved to the door and slid a peephole open. He saw a silhouette against pale light. He opened only a crack and spoke, leave it and go. The courier hesitated, and then placed a small wrapped bundle on the stoop. Luca's hands were already in motion. He snatched it up and unwrapped it at the table. Inside was a small stack of papers and a single photograph, a photographic print of the man who had fallen in the lot. The photo had been tucked into the folds of a payroll ledger. Adrian's fingers tightened around the photograph. He turned it over with an inch of brightness reflecting off the glossy edge. Maya leaned forward, because a photograph felt like a fact. She could see the man's face clearly now and realized she had seen him at a community center years before handing out donated blankets. She remembered the man had once smiled at her in a quiet line at a bakery. Small, tangible memories that replaced abstract fear. Adrian watched her watch the photograph, and for a rapid second the walls between them seemed to shift. You didn't know him? Did you touch him? Maya's reply was immediate and practical. No. I stepped back when he collapsed. The dialogue moved like measured gears. Each short exchange turned the story toward a clearer map of responsibility. Then Marco's men hit the safe house with a new sound. A truck's engine grinding to a stop 2 blocks away and heavy boots on the stairwell. Luca swore and reached for his sidearm. Adrian moved like a man who had practiced this exact set of motions. He checked the windows, moved Maya behind the couch, and pulled the lamp closer to the door to throw more shadow outward. The world focused to a thin corridor of sounds. The grumble of a generator, the scrape of a ladder, a voice ordering names that none of them wanted to hear. The Chapter S small climax arrived with the physical knockout of the door's chain as it gave way under force. Adrian shoved a bolt into place and then did something the night had not required a moment before. He lifted Maya up and put her behind him so he took the line of sight. He spoke quickly, giving 3 short orders. Luca, block the back. Maya, down and keep the locket hidden. The exchange was a rapid drop of responsibilities, and each person filled the role. Maya ducked, pressed the locket flat under her shirt, and curled her fingers around it. Her breathing was tight but deliberate. She had moved from stunned witness to an active participant in a shelter that belonged to a man she did not know and could not trust completely. Gunplay flashed through the door in tight, clinical bursts. Luca returned fire from the other room and shouted short coordinates.
2 at the stairwell! Left flank!
Adrian pivoted and moved in a single fluid arc, his body shielding Maya as he filled a gap in the doorway. Marco's voice cut through again, this time closer, rough with the certainty that he could demand what he wanted. Adrian, you know what this is about. Give her up and we'll leave you a warning. Adrian's reply was the short set of motions that came before his voice. He tightened his grip on the doorframe and braced. He did not answer Marco's words. He made a decision. Adrian stepped out through a side corridor and slammed a metal cart between him and the approaching men, buying a fraction of seconds. He did not shout. He used body position and the hard sound of metal to push momentum. Marco's men paused. For one sharp moment, everything depended on those precise moves. Luca yelled, "Now!" and Adrian lunged, ducked, and closed a service door behind him. The clatter of bodies, the shout of names, and a single broken lamp marked the peak of the chapter's action. When the noise subsided, the team counted and took stock. No one was dead in the safe house, though a plaster had cracked and a chair lay overturned. Marco's men had found only empty air and a smear of mud. Luca cursed at the loss of a vantage point, and then offered a practical route map for a relocation. We have to move her before dawn. Marco won't stop until he knows what she carries. Adrian looked down at Maya. For the first time, the man who had carried her did not ask questions about her motives or her past. He gave a guarded instruction and a measured promise. You will not answer anyone else tonight. Rest, we'll leave in 1 hour. The words were not sentimental. They were domestic and concrete. Lucas tugged at a curtain to check the street and reported nothing. Maya breathed slowly, following the measurement of her pulse against his coat. Fear had been the root of everything before. It had driven her to the pillar, into the SUV, in the safe house, into the act of hiding. Now her emotion shifted into practical resolve. She would protect herself and the locket. She put her hand over the photograph on the table and said, I can tell you where the dock is. I saw a delivery truck take a crate out past Pier 7 2 nights ago. The sentence was small and ordinary, and it proved to be valuable. Adrian lifted his head. Luca folded his arms and looked at the laptop. The 3 names of the chapter, Maya, Adrian, Luca, became the set that would move forward. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, but did not come closer. Inside, the safe house held a fragile calm. Adrian unrolled a folded sheet of paper and wrote a single note, then folded it and placed it beneath a weight, an old brass key. He pushed the key toward Maya and said nothing. She looked at it and understood that the act was both a protection and an assignment. Don't go wandering. Keep the key, use it only if needed. That concrete gesture ended the night's immediate conflict and set the next decision into motion. Maya lay back on a narrow cot and slid the key into the pocket of her coat. Her hands trembled when she held the locket and the photograph at once. Then she put them both in the pocket with the key. She watched Adrian move to the window, press his palm flat to the cold glass, and finally sit in the lamplight, unbuttoned his gloves and rubbed his fingers together as if warming a map. She could not read his thoughts, only watch the precise motions he made. He fed her a single line that had weight but no softness. "We leave at 2. Be ready." The command carried a promise of motion and a threat both. They would move, and someone would follow. A knock came at the front again, softer, deliberate. Maya sat up, heart quickening for the second time in the hour. This time the voice at the door was unfamiliar and calm. Adrian moved first, opened the door a crack, and peered out. A woman stood there with a delivery bag, small, innocuous, a perfect ordinary thing. She slid a note into his hand and left. Adrian read it, and the single line made his face close. He folded it, put it in his pocket, and then looked at Maya with an expression that could have been exhaustion or resolve. "Rest now. Wake me at 1:30. Luca will be here." That final practical instruction closed the chapter's immediate conflict with a concrete plan. Maya turned the locket in her fingers and felt the edges of the photograph. Fear had pushed her through the night as events and split into suspicion, and then a steady resolve. She had been carried away from the lot and into a house she did not own, protected by a man whose face she would remember forever. The night had changed the map of her life with precise motions, decisions, and a short string of orders. As she lay back and closed her eyes, the last noise she heard was the soft click of Adrian's boots as he moved down the hall, and the bolt being set one more time. The chapter ends with the door lock sliding home and the small, concrete fact that they would leave at 2 in the morning together and watched. A black sedan slid into their lane and Luca barked, "He saw us?" Fear pushed Maya's fingers to the small silver locket at her throat. The armored SUV hummed under Adrian's hands, and the world outside the reinforced glass narrowed to headlights and brake lights. The central problem was plain in that instant. Someone drove with the intent to catch them because of what Maya had seen earlier, the gunfire in the lot, and the face she could not forget. Maya's breath came shallow. She had flattened herself behind concrete and metal within the last hour, had felt the reverberation of bullets through her palms. Those details sat in her body like bruises. Now the SUV rocked as Luca eased off the gas and checked mirrors. Adrian's knuckles showed white on the steering wheel. He did not speak, but his posture communicated control. Maya's fear shifted into suspicion when she noticed the sedan's taillights matched a plate seen in her peripheral vision at the lot. Adrian gave a single precise command, "Luca, hard left." "Take the alleys." Luca nodded. He moved with practiced speed, voice clipped. The SUV collapsed into a narrower lane where brick walls leaned in. Maya gripped the leather of her satchel. Her fingers found the locket again and she pressed it against her sternum to steady a pulse that jittered against bone. Her suspicion hardened into a quiet resolve. She would tell what she could, but she would not be the reason someone else died. They threaded service alleys that smelled of wet cardboard and old oil. The city lights turned into thin streaks through the bulletproof glass. Adrian navigated as if he had run this route 1,000 times, checking back in the side mirror more than once. Luca kept a line of sight on the sedan at their 6. Sofia sat in the back, laptop open on her knees, fingers tapping. Her face was lit by the laptop's cold glow. She scanned feeds and security channels like a surgeon checking monitors. Maya watched Sofia's hands and tried to name the people who had chased her. Sofia one question and it landed between them. "Maya, tell me exactly what you saw. Names, clothes, any tattoos." Her voice was direct, efficient. Maya swallowed. The memory pushed forward in precise images. A man in a dark coat, a thin scar across his cheek, a logo stamped on a shell casing. The way a hand moved like it belonged to someone who had done the same thing before. Maya spoke in short bursts. "He wore a dark coat." "Maya, he moved left when the car backfired. There was a mark on his sleeve, an orange thread." I kept my head down. "He looked at me once." Adrian listened with his jaw set, You saw a face. Maya folded in on herself and answered, only for a second. He had a clean-shaven head and a thin scar on the right cheek. Her voice was steady but small. Sophia keyed the details into her system. She muttered, orange thread could be Verdi crew or a subcontractor. Shell stamping, hang on, the laptop responded with a quiet beep. Luca shifted his weight and tapped the rear window as a sign. The sedan kept pace, never dropping back. A sudden shift occurred in Maya's mind. Fear moved toward clarity. The people following them did not appear random. They had method. Adrian took the hidden exit that dipped behind a shuttered loading dock. The SUV folded into a narrow lane and the sedan glared past them, headlights stuttering. Sophia, we re close. There's a safe house 3 blocks ahead, converted warehouse. Surveillance blind spots mapped. Her tone contained relief and apprehension in equal measure. Adrian's answer was a flat nod. He had a decision to make. Bring her into his inner network or abandon a potential liability. He chose the network. They arrived at a converted warehouse with a single lamp at the door. Luca eased the SUV into a shadow so that only a slice of metal caught the light. Adrian moved with careful speed. He opened his door and extended his hand to help Maya down. She took it without thinking. His grip was firm and efficient. She felt the leather of his glove and the cold of the watch at his wrist. The safe house door closed behind them with a heavy click. Sophia led a quick sweep. The safe house smelled of old paint and coffee. She checked each room with a flashlight that painted small circles on concrete. Maya followed, listening to Sophia call out clear, minimal updates. Clear, corridor. Clear, back room, outside. A soft mechanical hum moved across the roof, the city. Inside, Adrian watched the sweep and the way Maya flinched at each small sound. He stepped closer to her in a way that did not invite conversation, only presence. When the sweep finished, Sophia sat at a makeshift table and placed the laptop there. She the same question again but sharper. Maya, tell me the sequence. Start from your car door. Maya closed her eyes for a beat and then spoke in small, concrete scenes. Sliding into the lot, the smell of cold gasoline, the punch of fear when the first bullet hit the concrete, the man who looked directly at her. Each sentence built into a clearer map of where the danger had come from. Adrian leaned on the table. He kept his voice low. Who else was there? Any names? Maya hesitated and then said, there was someone with a lighter laugh. He called someone Vin before the shots. Adrian's hand tightened around the edge of the table. He nothing for a moment. His control had a new angle. A personal stake that had not existed 2 hours earlier. Sophia's fingers moved over the keyboard. Vin. She repeated cross, reference with Verdi and Associates. Luca, check the service cameras for that license pattern. Adrian, any internal hits on that name? Lucas answered crisply while moving toward the supply closet. I'll pull feed from the perimeter. If they reorganized, we'll see patterns, the room filled with methodical noise. Keys, boots, the scrape of a chair. An unexpected, specific clue arrived when Sophia found a small shard of metal near the loading dock, an odd bullet fragment with a stamped code. She fit it under a magnifier and said, this isn't a street round. It's stamped by a supplier tied to Verdi's circle. Her voice carried a shift in the room. Suspicion in Maya's chest climbed into something tighter, fear edged into anger. Maya's hands went cold, Adrian's eyes flicked to her face. He, who is Verdi? Sophia answered without hesitation, a rival faction with long teeth. If they sent this, they knew the target. Luca tightened his jaw. Maya felt exposed in a new way. The attack had stopped being random. She had become a link. She pushed a chair back and stood. I didn't know anything about this world, she said. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I never wanted. Adrian cut in before she finished. Maya, say what you can. Names, a car, the voice. Anything helps. His voice was soft but firm. The exchange snapped into a quick rhythm of questions and short answers. Maya them about the man's watch, the way his shoulders moved when he spoke, the smell of cheap cologne. Adrian kept a steady stream of short, precise questions. Sophia interjected with technical demands. Luca offered observations about rotes. The group functioned like a clock rearranging itself around a new gear. They found another clue when Luca climbed to the rooftop and called down, headlights circling the block. Drone just skimmed past the warehouse. The report came as a hard, external event and the room shifted. Adrian's face went hard. He reinforced doors. Now, Sophia moved to a board and began overlaying possible breach points. Luca locked the heavy bolts. Maya felt the floor under her as hands moved to secure exits. The rising pressure moved into a higher gear. This was a mini cliffhanger that left questions raw in the air. The drone's low whine passed over the roof again. Sophia checked a handheld jammer and activated it. The drone S-feed fluttered. Outside, headlights pulled away and then circled. The team worked faster. Adrian checked the magazine of a pistol he kept at his belt and then pushed it back into the holster with a practiced motion. He did not look at Maya while he did it. His silence was a kind of command. Minutes later, the door exploded inward. Wood splintered. Men in dark coats shoved past the frame and the safe house filled with a roar, framed cows, shouts, the crack of metal on metal, the brief flare of gunfire. Adrian moved without hesitation. He shoved Maya behind a steel shelf, using his body as a shield. He issued short, audible commands to Luca and Sophia: cover the east window, Luca floor. Sophia rear. The team responded with compact, rapid actions. The attacker's breath smelled of exhaust. Maya felt the concussion of a nearby impact against the concrete. Her ears rang. She kept her hands cupped around the locket. She watched Adrian move through the room, not with cruelty but with the kind of precision that came from habit and pain. He struck once, hard, and a man went down. He did not celebrate. He checked the space around Maya with a glance and then returned to direct the defense. Maya's fear shifted again, this time toward a stunned gratitude she did not forgive herself for feeling. The attackers withdrew when Luca and Sophia cut their lines of approach. A shot ricocheted off a pipe and struck a column. The room held its breath for a few steady seconds and then exhaled into the business of counting and attending to scrapes. Sophia rolled a towel into a compress for Luca's hand where a sliver of metal had sliced the skin. Adrian moved to the center of the room and checked the entry point with a measured eye. He did not allow himself to look at Maya for more than a heartbeat. Sophia broke the silence with a blunt observation. This was targeted. They knew she would be here, or they knew what she had. She put the laptop between them and opened a file. Maya, can I see your locket? Maya hesitated and then handed it over. The locket felt small in Sophia's palm. She opened it with a practiced motion. Inside was a tiny photograph and a strip of paper with a sequence of numbers cramped into a corner. Sophia's fingers went still. Adrian leaned in when Sophia called his name. Adrian, you know her. The words arrived like a struck match. He reached for the locket and took it with careful hands. The picture was grainy and small. A woman in a dimly lit kitchen and a man standing 3 steps behind her, a profile only. The numbers were inked in a hurried hand. Adrian traced the photo with a fingertip and murmured a single name. Rossi. Maya's mouth opened and she said, Ivy never. She stopped. She could not finish. The reveal altered the landscape. The locket connected her to a person Adrian recognized. Rossi. Adrian repeated. He did not explain. He folded the paper and set it on the table like a detonator. His eyes found Maya. Did someone give you that? She shook her head. No. It's always been with me. My grandmother kept it. Adrian's face showed a new crack of curiosity threaded with something like impatience. The presence of the name made the danger personal. Sophia's fingers moved on the keyboard again. Rossi shows up in an old ledger tied to Verdi. This number? She tapped the digits into the search field. Is a phone registry that's been dormant for 3 years. Someone activated it last week. The room accepted a fresh layer of complication. Maya felt the movement of suspicion toward betrayal. She looked at Adrian and said, Who is Rossi? He gave a measured answer. Rossi used to run shipments through the South Docks. He disappeared when the last war started. If that photo is his handwriting, he's been moving in different circles. Luca, pull archived files on Rossi's contacts. Sofia, trace that numbers recent pings, they set tasks and moved as a unit. The emotional tone in the room shifted from survival to hunt. Maya watched them and felt both gratitude and the prick of being the pivot of decisions she did not fully understand. At one point, an argument sparked between Adrian and Sofia over the next move. Their exchange was quick and sharp. We take her to the main safe house. Sofia, no. We stay here until we trace the ping, Adrian replied. Staying increases exposure. We have a window to move now. Moving loses the trail. You want to control everything. Adrian, I control deaths. Sofia, I won gamble with hers. 3 to 6 fast lines clashed and then finally settled into action. Luca stepped in with a practical third voice. We split duties. 2 go to trace, 2 stay. Quick, clean. Adrian accepted it. Sofia gave a short nod. Maya felt the friction in their conversation as evidence that people with knowledge and tools disagreed on risk. The argument did not stall them. It drove a practical compromise. They discovered one more concrete thing before dawn. Sofia ran the number and pulled up a recent ping that placed movement on a warehouse pier near the river. The ping timing overlapped with footage Luca had pulled of a black sedan with an orange thread disappearing into a delivery corridor. A new twist tightened in Maya's chest. The attack was not random, and the locket's link drew a straight line to people who had the means and motive to follow that line. Adrian stood and made a decision that changed the tenor of the night. Luca, you and I take the feeder route to the pier. Sofia, hold here and scrub the feeds. Maya, you stay inside. Keep your head down. His voice had an iron edge. Maya opened her mouth to object, but then remembered how his hand had steadied her earlier, and the way he had shielded her when the door broke. The shift in her feelings was a quiet, risky thing. She felt a new, reluctant trust. Before they left, Sofia returned the locket to Maya and tapped the tiny photograph. This photo is another life, she said. It links to people who expected it to surface. Someone wanted it known. Maya wrapped her fingers around the locket as if holding an answer and a question at once. Adrian's expression hardened. We don't know who wanted it to surface. We know who followed us. We'll find both. The words laid down a clear, situational plan. They moved out in pairs at dawn, boots hard on wet concrete. Adrian and Luca drove one way. Sofia stayed to comb through feeds. Maya remained inside the safe house with a blanket and a cup of coffee that she did not finish. The morning light cut across the warehouse and painted the room with a plain, honest glare. Outside, the city resumed its indifferent rhythm. Inside, the group processed what had happened and prepared for the next move. Maya's last sight in the chapter was of Sofia at the laptop, eyes flicking across lines of code and names. Sofia tapped the file with the numbers and then looked up. We have a name connected to the ping. It's Rossi, sold Lieutenant Cleve Marini, she said. Adrian's hand tightened on his coat. He put the locket into his palm and said, Then we start with Marini. Luca nodded once. The chapter closed on that decision. A concrete target, a found lead, and a direction they would follow. The safe house doors stayed locked. The city continued its noise. Inside, people made a plan and readied themselves for what came next. Adrian swung the fire escape ladder and shoved Maya through the boarded door as boots pounded the stairwell. Fear made Maya's fingers clench the silver locket so hard the chain bit her skin. The first order, barked by Luca, both pulled and pushed her. Move now, do not look. They landed inside with splinters in their palms and a wooden plank scraping free in the doorway. Maya did not invent her fear. It came from noise she remembered. The night before, gunfire had hammered the parking lot, and she had flattened herself behind concrete, clutching the locket until the metal warmed to her skin. Now the same sound pattern and the same pursuit had followed them into the city. Within a handful of breaths, the concrete fact was clear. Someone had taken a photograph of the safe house and sent it, and the hunters had names and angles. That was the central problem. She was not a random victim. She carried something someone wanted, and that need transformed the people around her into threats and saviors. Adrian spun, slammed a shoulder against the doorframe, and counted men with a low voice that did not leave room for protest. How many in stare? He asked. He did not ask Maya. He had reason to expect her to be fragile and small and frightened. That did not change his method. Maya tucked herself against a bookshelf nailed to the loft wall and followed orders with quiet movements, because she had learned the only fast way out of panic was work. Breathe, move, listen. Elena had a pack of antiseptics and a wool blanket ripped from the loft couch. Keep your hands off the locket, Elena, and her tone left no space for argument. Maya clenched her jaw and held the locket steady between two fingers. Her pulse was loud in her ears. She measured each beat like a clock. Luca returned to the room with a photograph held crooked in his hand. He stopped, and the room tightened around the image as if sound had been cut. The photograph showed the loft's boarded exterior and a face, Maya's face, caught in the amber spill of a passing streetlight. Luca's voice was flat. Someone in our circle took this. Someone inside. The sentence landed as accusation and as proof. Fear shifted into suspicion in Maya. She watched Elena's fingers flex around a bandage and Adrian's jaw tighten. Suspicion pushed Maya to speak, because silence would let the men in the room decide everything for her. I saw part of a tag, she said. Her voice was a small thing, a blue stripe, and she stopped, because the detail was tiny and she could guess how men would turn a small thing into a map. Adrian inhaled, pinched the bridge of his nose, then asked, "A plate?" He did not soften the question. He could not afford softness. Maya named the letters she could remember. Her words were precise. Adrian repeated the fragment aloud, then nodded. The fragment gave him a lead. It changed their understanding. What had seemed random now looked targeted. Someone had put Maya in the center on purpose. That shift sent a new pressure through the group. They boarded up the windows again, this time with a sense that whatever they sealed from sight might not be enough. Elena and two bodyguards worked on the stairwell while Adrian checked the floor plans of the loft in his head. He kept his distance from Maya while still moving to shield her line of sight from the boarded door. He did not relent from his protective posture, but his expression remained even. Maya registered his hands. They read control, not tenderness, until he stepped closer and the line between them shortened by inches. At the kitchen table under a single lamp, Maya tried to put the image of the blue stripe together. She unfolded a napkin, smoothed it, and set the locket beside it. The metal looked ordinary. She tapped the locket once and it clicked faintly. That sound provided the next clue. Something small and hidden might be inside. Adrian sat across from her and asked one question. Who else knows about the locket? The question landed like a test. Maya named her mother and an old neighbor, then stopped. She had started to add another name, someone from her past who had made a threat months ago, but she swallowed it because the others in the room would react. Adrian's eyes found Luca, who handled security for the lot last night. He asked. Luca answered quickly, listing names and trucks and a brief exchange with an outside contractor. When Luca the contractor's name, Elena's hand tightened on a board she was sanding. The mention of that name connected to a man called Marco, a figure who showed up later in their plan. The conversation moved fast. Each sentence recalibrated danger. They decided to move. Adrian's voice was a command, but Maya heard something else. A direction aimed at keeping her alive. We go under the loading dock now, he said. We done to use the stair. Too open. Elena pushed a duffel toward Maya with water and a small spray bottle. Walk with me. Elena, we keep your head down. Maya followed. Each step down the narrow hallway tightened her stomach. The decision to go underground was an immediate choice, safer routes, but cramped and unnatural. At the freight elevator, Adrian spoke a single line, dry and fast. When I say run, you run to Luca, Maya nodded. The motion of the freight elevator carried the group down 3 floors. The cables hummed. In that closed metal box, Adrian's posture bent toward action. He checked weapons and counts. Alina looked at Maya and said, "Tell me the thing about the locket if you remember more." Her tone was gentle enough to make Maya's throat constrict. Maya forced a memory free. The locket had a folded sliver of paper with a street name on it that her grandmother had given once as a joke. She had never read it. She had only worn it. Her voice trembled when she said the street. Adrian wrote the address in his phone. The address pointed to a small storage unit 2 blocks from where they had started. Adrian's head moved in a way that kept his attention outward. Maps, options, exits. The small fact became a vector. The hunters were no longer random. They expected something she carried. They moved through the loading bay with boxes stacked high enough to break sightlines. The plan was to take a narrow service lane, cross behind pallets, and slip into a delivery van that Luca would drive. The air smelled of oil and wet cardboard. Adrenaline made movements clean and efficient. Elena and 2 guards checked corners and windows. Luca kept his back to the largest stack, scanning. Maya clutched the duffel and the locket like a child with a talisman. As they slipped between crates, a figure stepped out from the shadow of stacked shipping pallets. His shoulders were in a delivery jacket with a cheap logo. The jaws on the man were hard. Marco's eyes settled on Maya, and then moved over Adrian and Luca. He smiled as if he had been waiting a long time. The smile was small and deliberate. Marco one line that stopped the trajectory they were following. "You weren't supposed to make this easy." The words suggested he had expected her and knew her. His tone implied history without spelling it out. Adrian stepped forward and put himself between Marco and Maya. "Say why you here." Adrian him. Marco shrugged. "Orders. Someone wants her found." He pushed one hand into his pocket. Adrian's men braced. Luca's face went tight. Then, for a fraction of a second, Luca hesitated. He had been the man who had covered their exits for years. He had been faithful in ways that mattered to Adrian's world. That pause in his movement hurt Adrian more than any blade could. It was a decision fluttering at the edge of loyalty. Adrian made the choice faster than Luca's doubt could harden. "Luca, take her." Now, Luca's voice caught Adrian eye. He moved anyway, taking Maya's elbow and tilting her behind him. The hesitation had been visible. The action that followed read like a repair. Even so, the moment reworked everything in the room. Adrian watched Luca with a new measurement. He gave a terse order to Alina. "Cover back. Watch roof." Elena obeyed without look. Marco's hand came up too fast. A gun barked. The first flash popped reflections off wet plastic. The group scattered into trained motions. Boxes tumbled. Metallic noise shouted. Adrian shoved Maya behind a pallet, then threw his weight into the attacker. Glass and dirt hit the floor. Shots struck wood, kicked up splinters. Luca lunged and used his body to block an opening so Maya could move. Maya heard nothing but the compression of fight. Boots, grunts, an elastic snap of fabric. That was the moment when fear might have frozen her, but she had practiced moving. She ran as Luca shepherded her toward the van. Marco darted for an exit. Adrian grabbed at him, twisted, and pressed a hand to Marco's throat with a strength that made the man cough. They fought inside a broken doorway while Elena and 2 guards cleared paths. The skirmish ended with Marco stumbling back and running into the night. Luca came up bleeding along his forearm and shoulder, but on his feet. He had taken a bullet graze that left a wet line on his jacket. He didn't show panic. He only limped with the kind of control that masks pain. He had rebuilt something of his earlier hesitation by saving Maya. In the rear alley, under the cold light of a single street lamp, Adrian ordered a rapid check of wounds. Alina pressed gauze into Luca's shoulder. Maya sat on a crate and unbuttoned her coat with shaking fingers. She pulled the locket away and, with a deliberate motion, opened it. Inside, between brass halves, there was indeed a scrap of paper, an address and a name she did not know. That paper changed how she understood the night. She had not been an accidental witness. The locket was an object someone wanted. Elena looked at the paper. "This is of interest," she said, plain and practical. Her voice moved from the worry of a caregiver to the focus of an analyst. That name ties to a storage line the rival families use for drop points. Whoever ordered this wanted identification, not death. Her sentence made the operation feel surgical, not chaotic. Maya's fear shifted again into a different register. Suspicion of motives. Who would order that? Who sent Marco? Adrian did not say names. He did something else. He reached out and, with his thumb, wiped a smear of blood from Luca's collarbone. The gesture was small, but it carried meaning, the kind that arrives without a formal sentence. Adrian's control slid toward a private softness and then slid back. "We find the sender," he said shortly. He gave Luca a look that balanced threat and thanks. Luca blinked, fast and sharp, and then he coughed and let out a laugh that had no humor. "I messed that one up," he said, voice flat. "I saw him, Marco." Turned my head for a second. I froze. Sorry, his apology was quick and functional. Adrian answered with a single order. "Sit, we'll patch you." "Then you talk." They moved again, this time toward a rooftop that disguised their presence. The rooftop had a narrow parapet and a crate they used as a medical corner. The city boke spilled at a distance in amber and steel dots. Adrian had Elena check the van and Lucas' wound, while Elena packed a small medical kit into a nylon bag. Maya sat with a blanket around her shoulders and watched Adrian organize their small world. The group had a brief argument about where to go next. Elena wanted to send Maya somewhere safe immediately. Adrian argued they had to pursue the sender now while traces were hot. The exchange had 5 rapid lines of back and forth. "Elena, we move now." Adrian, "Not yet." Elena replied, "We can chase and protect her at the same time." We stall, they regroup. Adrian shot back, "We take the van and go." Luca, sudden and blunt. The debate ended when Luca's voice carried a strain that mirrored his wound. Adrian made the decision. They would take a targeted route, use the storage lead, and stage a controlled extraction. On the transit to the new point, Maya one practical question. If someone inside sent that photo, why not take her and leave? Her voice held an edge of something like accusation. Adrian answered without turning. He kept his eyes on the road, because the sender wanted reaction. Because they expected us to move, and movement gives them chances to make a bigger play. He did not offer more. Maya understood the sentence as concrete logic, not a sentiment. It made her uneasy in a precise way. Her life had become a chessman on someone else's board. They approached the storage facility at a crawl. Adrian kept the vehicle in shadow and sent 2 men out to beat the perimeter. The shipping yard smelled like diesel and cold metal. A single security camera whirred. The men returned and reported a delivery van matching the contractor's logo. The evidence lined up. Elena pointed to a man in an orange jacket near Bay 3. "That's the drop," she said. "Either the man moves or he waits. Both dangerous." They slipped between containers. The man in the orange jacket stood alone. Marco's face was not present. Instead, a different man watched the gates through binoculars. He carried himself like a lookout. As Adrian circled to cut off exits, a detail snapped into Maya's attention. The man had a tattoo at his wrist with the same blue stripe she had glimpsed on the tag. The realization changed anger into a sharper instrument. The tag matched the rival contractor, and that contractor had men watching the yard. Adrian made a move. He signaled Luca to take the left flank and Elena to stay with Maya. Luca hesitated, then nodded. The hesitation felt different now. No doubt but the memory of earlier falter. Then he ran. They closed in on a cluster of delivery vans. The lookout moved, and so did the men with him. Suddenly, a black SUV slid into the lot and headlights cut across the rows. The scene broke open. Men poured from vehicles and a ring of aggression formed. Marco stepped from the SUV, hair damp, collar up. He moved with the ease of a man who had been paid to wait. He stared at Maya when he saw her, and he smiled in a way that was both satisfied and petty. This time he did not try to talk. He tried to run. Adrian intercepted him. Gloves hit flesh, and there was a short, hard exchange of blows and words. Adrian pinned Marco, cuffed him by the arms, and looked for answers. "Who hired you?" he asked. Marco spat one name that did not sound like a high-level boss but like a courier. A fixer who arranged hits. Marco's sentence was short and defensive. Luca, catching his breath and leaning against a van, said he was paid to bring her, not to kill at first contact. Somebody wanted leverage. That line made the shape of the night's purpose visible. Maya was currency. They dragged Marco to a fenced unit and searched his pockets. Inside they found a cheap burner phone and a receipt for a storage locker. The receipt had been written in a handwriting that matched the name in the locket. The evidence stacked up. The locket had a contact. The contact owned the locker held a dossier, and someone had used that paper trail to make Maya a target. The twist shifted their thinking. Maya had not only been a witness. She had been selected because she carried a physical pointer to something else. Adrian's men fetched the locker keys and pried the padlock. Inside the unit, under a blanket and a set of empty crates, was a small hard drive wrapped in cloth. The drive had a sticker that matched a company associated with one of Adrian's rivals. Maya's hand went cold when she saw it. She had not known that anyone would use her locket to find a drive with data. She had not wanted the responsibility of that object. Now the object was the center of the room. Elena, the question that changed how they closed the night. Do we destroy it or do we rid it? The answers split roles. Destroying would erase immediate leverage. Reading would reveal who had ordered the operation. Adrian weighed it without drama. We read it, he said, but we control the information. We do not let it out. The decision meant they would take more risk, but it also meant they could stop the people who used the drive as bait. They took the hard drive back to the rooftop corner where Elena had a laptop. Luca made a face when he saw the dust on the device. It was silly human. He set a small lamp so Elena could work. She slid the drive into an encrypted reader and typed. The laptop screen glowed. Lines of names and transactions scrolled. Elena read aloud a single line that tightened the air. The drive held records of payments and a ledger that connected a low-level fixer to a mid-ranking handler inside Adrian's own supply chain. Maya felt a wash of something like nausea. Suspicion sharpened again. She had thought the attack came from outside always. Now the ledger said someone within the logistics chain had been working with the rival. That knowledge changed the moral landscape. Treachery was not simply opportunistic. It had a shape and a hand. Maya's touch on the locket tightened. Luca sat forward and lied in the way of confession. I saw a message on a burner this morning, he said. It was a bribe. They'd let my sister go if I stepped aside. I didn't, he answer. I froze when Marco stepped in front, because I thought my hesitation could cost her life. I should have moved faster. His voice was raw with responsibility. This new revelation acted like an emotional pivot. Betrayal became burden, then possible redemption. Adrian listened. He did not deliver an immediate sentence. He measured Luca by the way he bared his wound and the way he had used his body in the fight. Adrian finally said, "You tell me every message. You tell me about the sister." Then we closed the ledger and we cut off the fixer. The instruction made Luca into an actor with a role to repair damage, not merely a defendant. Luca agreed. He spoke the words and his speech was crisp and specific. Names, times, payments. Adrian wrote. Elena mapped the connections. Maya, who had started the night as someone pulled along, now offered a single tactical suggestion. Send an encrypted trace to the burner that paid Marco. Let them think the drive moved. The suggestion showed her moving from fright to strategic action. They set the trap. Elena staged a false transfer message on the burner and made the ledger appear to leave the rooftop. Then Adrian made a call, a single line into an encrypted channel to an old contact who owed him favors. The contact agreed to intercept. Time tightened. The interception happened fast. A courier from the rival reached for the fake transfer and walked into a blocked alley where Adrian's men waited. They took him alive. Under pressure, he named the fixer and the mid-level handler who had access to the logistics chain. The route through which the photograph had been sent started to look like a wire pulling toward a single name. The thread ended with proofs and a confession that filled gaps. That revelation closed the main moral problem of the night. The leak had come from a chain of men who had sold their access to a fixer trying to destabilize Adrian's control. It was not a simple betrayal by a single friend. It was a cartel of convenience. At dawn, under the rooftop's pale light, Alina packed supplies while Luca washed his wound and checked the stitches. Maya watched them move with a slow, steadying breath. The fight had ended. Marco had been turned over to men who ran the rival's internal discipline. Adrian had ensured Marco would trade names for leniency. Luca had earned a kind of reprieve by the willingness to bleed and tell everything he knew. In concrete terms, the immediate threat had been contained. The fixer was caught, the ledger was secured, and the men who had shot at them had no foothold in their network left that night. Maya held the hard drive in both hands. It felt heavier than the metal and cloth suggested. She had begun the night as a woman with a locket, and ended with evidence that forced choices on others. She turned it over and then handed it to Adrian. "I want to know everything on it," she said. Her voice was small but clear. It was no longer only fear that guided her words. She wanted to understand the harm that had brushed her life. Adrian nodded and slid the drive into his jacket. He did not promise anything in words. He made a movement to his men, to return to base, to bind wounds properly, to speak to families. On the rooftop, Luca sat close enough to hear Maya's breathing. "You did good, Maya." The line was simple. She looked at him. "You did good too," she answered. The exchange was practical. It acknowledged danger and performance, not sentimental salvation. Alina zipped the last of the kits into the bag and checked the van's engine. "We leave at first light," she said. "Adrian, you'll take the drive to a secure node. We'll run damage control. Luca, get your sister someplace safe." Adrian agreed with a single nod. The plan was concrete and final. They had fixed the immediate problem. They would not pretend everything was solved forever. They had actual steps to take. Before they left, Adrian stepped toward Maya and said one sentence that altered the terms between them. "You will come with me until I can guarantee the risk is closed." The line had the weight of command and the texture of certainty. Maya looked at him, then at Alina and Luca. She measured what it would cost to keep her own life safe against the cost of letting a dangerous man continue to manipulate her fate. She chose. "I'll go," she said. The words were not a surrender, they were a chosen step. Maya put the locket back over her shirt and slid the hard drive into a small pocket Adrian had offered. Adrian's hand brushed her shoulder in a way that was neither rough nor overly tender. It was a practical steadying. Luca watched and rubbed at his arm. They left the rooftop as the first pale blue of dawn cut the horizon. Elena locked the van and checked the ignition. Luca sat in the passenger seat while Maya took the rear and held the blanket around her knees. Adrian drove. The van moved through quiet streets that smelled of wet asphalt and coffee shops still locked. The immediate circuits of danger had been broken, and the men who had fired at them had been taken out of the equation. The ledger lay with Adrian. The names were in his hands. At the last moment before they parted, Adrian looked at Luca and said, "You still stand with me, Luca." Luca blinked, and then answered with the same bluntness that had pulled them through the fight. "Yes, Adrian. I'm with you." The line closed the choice. It was a repair and a renewal of loyalty made concrete by action. Maya stepped out onto Adrian's private lot and stood beneath a lamp while Adrian dealt with calls. He did not speak at first. When he finally looked at her, he asked one practical question. "Do you want to go someplace plain? Somewhere quiet?" She thought for a beat and then said, "Yes. Somewhere I can sleep without waking to footsteps." Adrian inclined his head. He had the resources to make such a place. He arranged it without fanfare. As they moved inside to the quiet apartment Adrian had arranged, Alina called out that a courier had just delivered an encrypted message to Adrian's phone. Adrian read it without showing the screen. The message contained a single sentence. The operation that had tried to use Maya as bait came from a fixer who had misread the ledger and now wanted to vanish. The men who had paid Marco were in retreat. The message ended with a threat that promised trouble elsewhere, but the immediate chain that had put Maya in danger that night had been dismantled. Inside the apartment, Alina tightened the bandage on Luca's shoulder over a sink and washed her hands. Luca sat on a chair and watched the window. Maya sat on the couch and leaned one shoulder against its arm. The silence between them had the shape of exhausted people who had not yet slept. Adrian stood by the window, and after a moment, he closed the curtains. They had resolved the night's crisis. The leak had been traced, the courier intercepted, Marco captured, and the drive secured. Luca had confessed his moment of doubt, and then chosen to act. Alina had moved from caregiver to strategist. Maya had shifted from victim to participant, and in doing so, she claimed a place in the chain of decisions. Adrian set the hard drive on the coffee table and pushed it toward Maya. "You were in the middle of this," he said. "You choose what we do with the information next." His words required a decision from someone who had been dragged into a dangerous world. Maya slid the locket over her fingers and then opened the hard drive's cloth. She did not speak long. "We hand it to people who can stop the fixer and then destroy the copies," she said. "We done let it trade hands again." The instruction read like a plan. Adrian listened and then moved his phone to begin the calls that would convert the plan into action. Outside, the city woke. Inside, the small group followed through. Alina packed the last medical supplies into a case for a team that would trace the fixer overseas. Luca made a call to his sister and arranged a safe house. Adrian set the drive into a secure transport and sealed a chain of custody. Maya sat and watched each action with close attention. The heavy weight in her hands, both the drive and the locket, felt like a test she had passed not by bravado but by deliberate choice. When the immediate threads were tied, Adrian walked to the table and closed his hand over the locket. He did not touch her body. He used the object as a hinge between them. "Rest now," he said. His voice softened but did not give way into speeches. Maya nodded and let the couch take her. Morning light cut across a small square of floor. Alina left to meet a contact. Luca went with a driver to take his sister to safety. Marco was in a van guarded by men who would make sure he talked. The fixer would wake to calls that would unravel his plans. The night's primary danger had been eliminated through specific moves and specific confessions. The hard choices had been made by named people. Luca had confessed and redeemed himself by action. Elena had suggested the tactical move with the burner. Adrian had chosen to spare and to trust while also administering justice. Maya rose and walked to the window. She held the locket in her hand and watched a delivery truck pass. Fear remained as a practical sensation. Her fingers still tightened on objects when the world felt raw, but it was no longer the single force driving decisions. She had moved through fear into suspicion, then into choice, and into a steadier, wary trust. She set the locket on the table next to the drive and left it there as a marker of what had started the chain. Adrian came to stand behind her without touching. He one sentence that was neither promise nor threat. "We close this cleanly. There will be no more nights like that for you." The sentence was forward, looking, and operational. Maya turned and met his eyes. She believed him in the only way that mattered, by what he had already done. A knock came at the door, 2 hard taps. It was Alina returning with summonses that required signatures. Adrian opened the door. The knock was ordinary. A courier handed an envelope that required an initial. Adrian signed, folded, and slid the envelope into a drawer. Then he locked the drawer and slid the hard drive into a safe that would not open without several codes. That final, concrete sequence closed the chapter of escalation and set the immediate threat into boxes that could be tracked and audited. They had sealed the immediate danger. They had named the betrayers and broken their line. They had punished, patched, and protected. The night's moral and physical trials concluded by action, capture, confession, and a practical chain of custody for the evidence. The group's loyalties had been tested and reformed through choices everyone had to make. Maya gathered the locket and the small cloth that had wrapped the drive and placed them into a plain envelope. She wrote a single line on a scrap of paper and folded it under the locket. A name and a date to mark where she'd been and what she had done. Then she stood, zipped her coat, and followed Adrian out into the stairwell. They did not speak until they were on the lower landing. Adrian stopped, looked at her, and said, "You did not ask to be pulled into any of this. But you chose how you would answer it. That matters," Maya nodded. She did not need more words. They left the building together. The morning air felt neutral, cold, practical, unsentimental. Elena drove Luca and his sister to a safe house. Adrian took the drive to men who would dismantle the fixer's remaining network. Maya went with him for protection and to give statements, and because she had decided to be an active partner in closing the last loose threads. As the van engine started and they pulled away, Maya ran one last finger over the locket and let it settle against her chest. The immediate conflict had been resolved through action and through named choices. There remained a larger landscape of danger beyond the night's arrest, but the people in the van had done what they could with the tools and the names they had. That work had changed them all. On the dashboard, Adrian set his phone on silent and, after a moment, placed a single missed call to Luca. Luca answered on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, Adrian." Then he added, "Tell your sister I asked about her." The line ended with a simple move toward human bookkeeping, a detail, a promise of care. Maya watched the city move by and felt a quiet exhaustion that was not vanity. It was the result of choices. The decision to speak when she knew something, the decision to open the locket, the decision to come with Adrian. Those choices had redirected danger into containment. By the time they pulled into a secure compound, sunlight had flattened the night's angles into facts. They checked in at the safe node. Elena handed over evidence to a trusted analyst, and Adrian placed the drive in a tamper-proof vault. The work had been specific and final. Maya stepped out into the compound courtyard and planted her feet on the gravel. She looked at Adrian and said, "Thank you." The words were small and direct. Adrian inclined his head. Nothing extravagant. He had given protection. She had accepted it. Both had taken a cost. They had resolved the immediate danger by naming who had betrayed them, by capturing the fixer, and by securing the evidence. Lucas' loyalty had been tested and then repaired through confession and sacrifice. Elena had provided the practical moves that kept them alive. Maya had moved from terror to action, and she had, in a concrete way, changed the terms of her own life. The chapter ended on a sealed safe and a set of decisions already put into motion, calls made, enemies exposed, and a choice accepted. Adrian closed the vault door and turned. "We will make sure no one else can use this against you," he said. Maya nodded and walked away with Elena to get coffee. The morning moved on, and so did they, with concrete plans in motion and decisions recorded in actions rather than promises.